Good evening, everyone. Tonight we're going to be learning a mimer from Torah Ohr, Parshas Chayei, Daf Yud Zayin, the 17th page of Torah Ohr, 17 Gematria Toiv, discussing the inner dimension of what it means and the significance of Yitzchok going to talk to Hashem in the field. This is retelling the episode of when Rivka is coming back with Eliezer. And so the pasuk says, Vayeitzei Yitzchok l'suach basadeh. Yitzchok exit. Yitzchok goes out. L'suach basadeh, to converse in the field. And the Gemara says that this is a reference to Yitzchok establishing the prayer of Mincha, the afternoon prayer. Avram establishes and is symbolic of Shacharis. Yitzchok is symbolic and establishes Mincha, and Yaakov is Ma'ariv, and this is the pasuk that proves Yitzchok. But deeper than that, he could have just said Yitzchok establishes a prayer, or Yitzchok goes to speak to Hashem. What is the significance of him emerging from his regular place and specifically going to a field? The significance of the field in regards to prayer. Levar Zeh, to understand this, the Alter Rebbe says, in order to understand the significance of a field, we first must assess the difference between a Mishnah and a Brisa. We know that the Mishnayos were redacted and compiled by Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, Rebbe, as a result of the dictum of Eis Lasis LaHashem Heferit Eresecha. David HaMelech says in chapter 119 of Tehillim that a time to do for God, we abrogate your Torah, which implies that sometimes we have to go against the Torah in order to keep the Torah. For example, God forbid, a fire breaks out on Shabbos, a person is permitted to there's ramifications of how much you're allowed to, but if somebody's life is in danger, because the Torah mandates v'chai bahem, we should live by them, that the Torah is a Torah of life, therefore, outside of the three cardinal sins of idolatry, adultery, and murder, one must keep his life, ensure that life goes on, and therefore we abrogate the Torah. So that's the general principle. Rabbi Yehuda Anasi applied that to the forgetting of the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Torah Sheba'al Peh was not allowed to be written as the definition of the oral law, that Hashem wanted there to be a written law and an oral law communicated orally without being written. And Rabbi Yehuda Anasi, seeing that the Jewish people were forgetting, he redacted and compiled a Mishnah of various sayings of the sages. And then we have a Brisa, which is also a compilation of sayings of our sages, but did not make it into the canon of Mishnayos. Brisa is Pirush HaMishnah, and the Brisa can be even more explanatory than the Mishnah itself. Ki ha-Mishnah hu haklal. Mishnah is the more comprehensive general principles of Torah, and also in regards to the opinions, that the opinions are much more comprehensive, much more general. U'Brisa hi ha-Prat. And the Brisa are more detailed, are more precise, are more exact, Shalom Mishnah, of the Mishnah. Ve'ein bichlal ala masha bifrat. And nothing is contained in the general and anything that is contained within the specifics is contained within in the general. So now the actual definition of Brisa means, etymologically, from the word var. Var means outside, even though in Aramaic var can also mean son and belonging to, but in this, it also refers to something outside. U'Brisa, v'lichayra ha-Brisa hi lemata min ha-Mishnah, seemingly, now the Alter Rebbe catapults us into a spiritual discussion of where is the source and origin of different Torah interpretations, different dimensions of Torah. So he says that seemingly the Brisa is on a lower caliber of spiritual sensitivity than the Mishnah. That it descended lower. And how is it How are the Braisas expressed in the sense that they descended lower? Because it is more detailed and because it gets more involved in the nitty-gritty, this implies more of a connection, almost like a tethering to the physical world in a greater way. Whereas because Mishnayos is regarded as much more klaliistic, much more general and comprehensive, being that it didn't become tethered or tied down to the physical world, therefore it's less terse, it's less involved in physicality. Hence, its lack of details. So he's saying that that's a qualitative advantage to show that Mishnah is higher than Braisa. Because Mishnah is more comprehensive and more general, and Braisa is more specified and more detailed, therefore it shows on the lack of spiritual sensitivity or caliber that the Braisa has relative to the Mishnah. But the Alter Rebbe says, Avala Emes, however, in truth, Hu Sha Braisa Gavoya Yoiser, in truth, we know that anything that fell lower originates higher. And therefore, being that the Braisa in our physical world, because it did not make it into the canon of Mishnayos, implying that it lacks a certain spiritual caliber, sensitivity, and therefore is more terse and more involved in the details. However, there's a principle, the Seif Maisa b'machshava tchila, that the end product, the end action, is woven within the original thought. Which means that being that the Braisa in this physical world is lower than the Mishnah, implying that it has more reach in regards to the materiality of the world, nevertheless, it originates at a much higher level. And being that it originates at a much higher level, implying that it's connected more to the luminary of God, the luminary of Torah, therefore it can reach to the specifics and details of the world. Its lowliness is indicative of its greatness and highness. So now he's speaking about Torah in general, that Torah, as pristine, as sublime as it is, nevertheless, it descended and devolved into a reality of physicality, and not only the physical world, not only does Torah discuss the physical world, but it even gets involved in the lies of the physical world. Afilu b'davar sheker, that it entertains notions of falsehood. Kegoin, for example, we have the first Mishnah in one of the Babas, Baba Mitzia, no? Kegoin, ze oimer ani mitzasia, chuli, right? For example, it says that two people, right? Shnaim oiks metalis is where? Look it up. One of the Babas, yeah, that two people are fighting over a garment. And they're fighting as a result of it being in a public domain. One declares into the court, Ani mitzasiya, I found it. And the other says, no, I found it. And there's all of these ramifications and results of this situation, this discussion. But what's the essence of the discussion? One person is lying. So you'll say, what does Torah have to do with lies? Torah is the Torah of truth, Torah emes, right? Moshe emes, the Torah say emes. And nevertheless, this pristine, beautiful, sublime, truthful reality has now descended into a reality of sheker, to the point that it discusses notions of sheker, notions of lies, notions of falsehood. So based on what it appears is that Torah descended into such a lowly environment. Nevertheless, so he's giving Torah as a general example for the differentiation between Mishnah and Braisa. And he's saying, even though we'll regard Mishnah as higher than Braisa, because Braisa is more specific and detailed and regards the physical world in a greater way, this is reflective of Torah in general. The theme of Torah in general is that even though Torah comes from a sublime, pristine place, nevertheless, Torah in general descended to such a physical place, to the point that it entertains the ideas of falsehood and lies. Why? Because Torah as well has this principle of kisei ma'aseh b'machshava tchila. The end action is woven within the original thought. For example, the mashal of a tube, that which goes in first, will then emerge last. For example, like the human being, that is the end result, the end product of the sequence of creation. In the sequence of creation, that Hashem created man last, And nevertheless, notwithstanding his end point in the sequence of creation, he is the most prominent or prestigious of all of existence. And everything was created for him. So just because he was created last, i.e. the final product, i.e. Soif Maisa, nevertheless, the Soif Maisa is actually a qualitative advantage in the sense that everything was created for him. And therefore we find that all of reality and all of existence can be for the sake of one person. To instruct and to guide that everything that a person sees in reality, everything, any animal, any tree, any insect, any physical phenomena, is all for the sake of the individual, is all for the sake of Adam. That's one of the reasons why Adam was created individually, by himself, to show that we all have that energy, that spark of God, and it's all for the sake of the individual. And this is the whole purpose, the whole notion of man. That we have this high quality or caliber, being so connected to the divine, that we understand that even though we were created last, everything was created for us. This is the implication of what our sages say, that more beautiful, more precious is one moment of teshuvah and good deeds in this world than the whole entire world to come. Again, how could we say that? If the whole entire world to come is this spiritual reality that we are all, this bliss that we're all fascinated by and excited for, and nevertheless comes our sages and uproots the whole entire desire for Olam Haba, and it becomes eclipsed by the fulfillment of Olam Hazeh. And yet, Olam Hazeh is much lower in spiritual caliber relative to Olam Haba. So how can you tell me that one moment of teshuva and good deeds eclipses the whole bliss and reality of the future world? So in order to understand that, we have to understand the nature of Olam Haba. The nature of Olam Haba is that righteous souls, and every single soul of every single Jew is righteous, are basking in the bliss of spiritual comprehension and understanding. Nevertheless, that spiritual bliss and understanding and comprehension of the soul in Gan Eden, in Olam Haba, is merely and only achurayim, the externality and the superficial dimension of God's Torah, of God's presence, of God's existence. K'maimer, as it says, that Hashem says to Moshe, you'll only be able to see my hind part, my backside. My backside is not it's an anthropomorphic expression for an exterior dimension of godly reality. That this is reflective of the pleasure that an individual perceives in his divine service. Nevertheless, that pleasure is hu bechinas achurai, meaning to say the divine service of an individual in this physical world generates a very powerful, glistening light of comprehension for this soul in the world to come. And nevertheless, however profound that light and that understanding, which was generated by the soul in this world, created in the next world, it is only and merely an achurayim, an exterior dimension of God's presence. And Hashem says, my face, meaning to say panai from the word my face, my primius, my inner dimension, it's impossible for you to grasp or understand. Why? For no man, no human being can see me and live. And that is not only an expression of the divine presence in this physical world, that he has to curtail his true manifestation because it's too powerful, it's overwhelming, but that's also an expression of Olam Haba, that Olam Haba is only a mere glimpse and glimmer of Hashem's understanding, Hashem's Torah. And by way of this, that the bliss and tainug and pleasure of the soul basking in the future world is only the exterior, so to the revelation of Gan Eden is only a mere glimmer and radiance alone. And therefore the sages can emphasize and underscore the power of this world, More beautiful, more precious is one moment of teshuvah and good deeds in this world for the whole entire world to come. Why? Based on the principle, because only in this physical world can any level of bliss and any level of intellectual comprehension be stripped and to the bare bones of the action itself, but replete within the action itself is the divine essence and not only divine radiance. When you're dealing with a level of divine of spiritual bliss and pleasure and understanding, there's still some type of box, some type of framework that you're still dealing with, a rationality, a logic that blocks and creates a hindrance between you and the essence of Hashem. But when all of that is stripped and all you have is the Maisa is an embodiment, a personification of God's essence beyond all personal feelings and rationale and bliss. And therefore the Maisa in this physical world, bli tainug, bli seichel, without any pleasure, without any intellect, mikol chayil hava, eclipses the whole entire energy of Olam Haba, the Seif Maisa b'machshava tchila, because the end action is woven within the original thought. By way of this analogy, again, this metaphor differentiating between Olam Haba and Olam Hazeh, can we then discover and understand the difference between Mishnah and Brisa? That the Mishnah is the general, more comprehensive principles. For example, the Mishnah discusses tzitzis on each of the four corners of the garment, which invalidate each other if one of them is missing. Just to give some context, in the Mishnah, the laws of tzitzis are not explained in detail. There are only two Mishnayos that directly discuss tzitzis. The last Mishnah of chapter 3 of Menachos and the first Mishnah of chapter 4 of Menachos, where the obligation of putting tchelis of the tzitzis is mentioned. However, the Gemara in Menachos, there are 6 pages explaining the laws of tzitzis, and then you have 6 pages in Gemara and Brises that are brought to explain the details of the tzitzis. So we see clearly in regards to tzitzis that the Mishnah's teachings are only general, whereas almost all of the details are only explained in the Brisa, which is quoted and further specified. And so too we have this Mishnah, the first Mishnah in Sukkah, a Sukkah in which its schach is higher than 20 amis is invalid. The Mishnah doesn't give any reason for this statement. However, the Gemara explains it in much more detail. And the reason for this is, so now the explanation, he says, now regarding these general statements, it's possible to find a reason to explain for them. For example, when the Mishnah mentions the obligation to put on tchelis, the color of tchelis is similar to the color of the sea, and the color of the sea is similar to the color of the sky. And the sky reminds us of the throne of glory, which is where Hashem's presence sits. It's possible to find the reasoning. So too with Sukkah. That the Torah says you should dwell in Sukkahs for 7 days in order that your future generations will know that I, Hashem, caused the children of Israel to dwell in Sukkahs when I took them out of Egypt. Now, only when the schach is less than 20 amas high does the person know that he is sitting in a sukkah. Again, so we're giving reasons, even though we just said there's no logic to why you need to put on tchelis necessarily. We're finding a drush, we're finding an implication and a background to the reason of why tchelis is inspired or motivated. The idea of reflective of the ocean reflective of the sky, and the idea of sukkah that it needs to be less than 20 amas because that's the idea of recognition. That higher than a certain height, the recognition of the presence of the sukkah cannot be as recognized. But that's in a very general, comprehensive way. The Brisa contains the details to explain the mission, all of its details and intricacies. So, for example, K'moi Sukkah Ganbach V'Rakbash. This is an acronym from the Gemara, or really from a Brisa. What's Ganbach and Rapkash? This is from Sukkah Daf Ches Amud Beis Tanu Rabbanan Ganvach. What's Ganvach? A sukkah that was a sukkah belonging to Goyim, a sukkah belonging to nashim. So ganbach is goyim, nashim, behema, and kutim. Okay, different circumstances of when a sukkah would be permitted or prohibited, and it uses this acronym of ganbach. And what's rakbash? Sukkahs royim, sukkahs kayotzim, sukkahs burganim, sukkahs shein repedes, ksheda ubilat sheteyam sukkah bilkel chasa. What is here? I'll read it in English. These two words are acronyms for the Hebrew words of cases of sukkahs that were not originally made to be used for the mitzvah of sukkah, but those who are obligated in the mitzvah, but nonetheless are valid to be used for the mitzvah as long as they were made to provide shade from the sun. And they are a sukkah of Gentiles, a sukkah of women who are exempt from the mitzvah of sukkah made for sheltering animals, and the sukkah of kutim, people who pretended to convert to Judaism but really didn't. And then you have, what's rakbash? Royim, sukkah of shepherds while on the job during the rest of the year. Kayatzim, sukkah used by people drying fruit in the fields during the summer. Burganim, sukkah of shopkeepers during the year. And Shem repairers, sukkah of people who guard the fields during the year. So what's the significance here? She'ein tam ledavar b'nida b'chu shel l'maylam ha'seichel. That in these detailed cases, there's no revealed explanation as to why sukkahs are permitted to be used, and we can clearly see that these laws of Torah are higher than any logic or explanation or rationale. So even though the Gemara gives explanation for the reasons of the Mishnah statement, that a sukkah which is higher than 20 amas is invalid because there is no notion of recognition, the Gemara does not offer an explanation as to why a sukkah is valid, even though it was not made for the purpose of the mitzvah at all, and was instead made for protection from the sun, as in the cases of these 8 cases, where the sukkah was built to be used during the year for shade and not for the mitzvah of the festival of Sukkot. We see that even though we find general explanation for the reasons of the mitzvahs, when it comes to the details, we have no such explanation. Another prime example is the mitzvah of tefillin. Even though we have a general explanation for why we put on tefillin, to place the unity of Hashem written in the Shema on our minds, near our hearts, and thus to dedicate ourselves to Hashem. When it comes to the details of the mitzvah, for example, they must be perfectly square, and the straps must be black. What's the explanation? There's no logic. So we see from the details of the mitzvahs that we cannot explain the reason for the mitzvahs. They are Hashem's will and wisdom, which is beyond human comprehension. And that's the meaning of the principle. The information of a general teaching comprises no more than the sum of all of its details. That means that there's nothing contained in the Mishnah, which is the general teaching, more than that which is referred to in the Brisa. And the fact that the reason has been hidden from us, has been concealed from us, is indicative of its heights, indicative of its spiritual location, which is beyond the will and wisdom which is beyond the wisdom of what we could comprehend. And that's the nature of mitzvahs. And that's really the nature, that's what we were discussing before. The end product is woven within the original thought. And perhaps the original thought eclipses and is truly greater than the wisdom and the will that the mitzvahs seemingly can fit into. And therefore, that's the power of the action. Nevertheless, the Alter Rebbe says, God willing, Mirz Hashem, in the future time, it will be revealed. Rav Shimon, I think it's Rav Shimon. Yeah, Darish Taimeh Dikroi. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai would explain the reasoning of the verses. Shedarish Shemash Nemer B'Paziv Tam Shal Davar Lo Yizeu Iker Rak Sheish Tam B'Zeh Gavay Yesh L'Mayim Matam. He would explain that the reason for mitzvahs mentioned in the verse is not really the main reason for it. Rather, there's a higher, deeper reason for them that is beyond our understanding. So here in the English, he gives an example. With regard to a Jewish king, the Torah says that he may not marry more than 18 wives. The reason given, this is from Dvarim 17:17, that he should not increase for himself wives in order that his heart not be turned away from serving Hashem. The Gemara explains that according to Rav Shimon, the king cannot marry even one wife who will turn his heart away from Hashem. Even though the reason mentioned in the verse is an explanation for why he cannot marry many wives, and not why he cannot even marry and why he cannot have even one wife who is improper. Nonetheless, Rav Shimon explains that the reason for the mitzvah of not having too many wives is to avoid any negative effect on the king. Therefore, even one improper wife is forbidden. The fact that the verse mentioned that he should not have too many wives is a separate prohibition, that he should not have more than 18 wives, even if they are all righteous and he wishes to add another righteous wife. We see from Rav Shimon's approach that even where the verse itself gives a reason for the mitzvah, there is more to the reasoning of the mitzvah than what the verse says, since he interprets the verse's reason of an order that his heart not be turned away as an additional prohibition against marrying even one improper wife, rather than explanation for why he cannot marry 18 wives. We see from this that according to Rav Shimon, whenever the Torah gives a reason for a mitzvah, it is actually providing additional details to the mitzvah, since the ultimate reasons for the mitzvahs are completely beyond human comprehension and were never revealed. Nimtza, so what's the conclusion of all this? That regarding a mitzvah, that you cannot discern its fundamentals, that you cannot discern its reasoning, is indicative of its profound heights. And that which you can discern, that which you can grasp, that which you can taste and understand and have a gishmak towards, have a pleasureful understanding towards, is indicative of its superficiality, and it's only the exterior. And it's not what the world thinks, that the primary thing is to motivate and stimulate the heart, that you should grasp and always be in tune and aware of the pleasure that Torah contains, that Hashem contains, and to serve Hashem with tremendous passion and fieriness. The Alter Rebbe says in this Maimer, ve'ena kena emes. This is not the truth, meaning this is not the whole truth. It's not this negate, God forbid, to serve Hashem with passion. But it also, God forbid, should never negate serving Hashem without passion. Meaning to say, that the primary thing, the most fundamental thing, and where you are truly holding, grasping, and hugging God is literally within action, whether there is pleasure or not. And here he's emphasizing and underscoring the power of no pleasure. The heart is only there to assist the wings. Meaning to say the wings are what? The love and the reverence. But it is not necessarily the primary aspect of the body of the mitzvah. The Mishnah is metaphorically referred to a city, and the Brisa is metaphorically compared to a field. Because Brisa in Aramaic comes from the word bar. Bar means chutz. Bar means outside. What is a field? A field is usually, is the outside, the outskirts of the city. When you are comparing a field to a city, you would say that the city, the metropolis, is of fundamental importance, being that that's the primary location of human beings. That's where the people live. Nevertheless, who feeds, who gives energy, who gives vitality to the metropolis are the farmers and is the field. It's the field that is on the outskirts of the city, that from there is brought all the produce. So too is the Brisa. That what mechaya Mishnah, that even though it's the outside, and even though it's eina klal elo masha bifrad, that anything is contained that is contained in the Brisa is automatically contained in the Mishnah, and the comprehensive generalness of the Mishnah is including all the details of the Mishnah of the Brisa. Nevertheless, the Brisa is mechaya Mishnah. The Brisa, like the field, like the farmers, is the engine, are the shepherds to shepherd the food and the sustenance of the Mishnah. And therefore it has the capability to explain many more details and many more specificities when it comes to the laws. How to do things. What is that? Yeah. Our sages say, this is from Gemara and Soita 22a, those who only teach Mishnayos destroy the world, since they render decisions of halacha based on a superficial reading of the Mishnah without commentary of the Brisa, which here he's, I think, explaining that Brisa and or Gemara is similar. The Alter Rebbe has explained the difference between the Mishnah and the Brisa, and the advantage that the Brisa, i.e. the field, has the sustaining powers as a result of it having the capability of explaining the details. Just like a physical field gives grain, which is used to make bread, which in turn sustains their very life. So, Tanoim, it's interesting, we say, the Tanoim, who are the masters of the Mishnah, also have the same letters as Eitan, which means strength, power. But if this is referring to people who only learn Mishnayos without the explanation behind them. How does he wrap this up and relate it to our pasuk? This is what the pasuk is trying to underscore, that Yitzchok had to leave somewhere. He had to vacate a certain premises. Perhaps he had to vacate a certain spiritual bliss, tainug, seichel, lasuach, to go converse, but where? Basada. In a place that is not his own. In a place that is outside. Go into a realm of the external. Hu loshin dibur besichel, loshin shchi lamata, loshin besachrim anoshim. And Yitzchak went out to talk. This word lasuach is an expression of talking, but it also is an expression of shechia. Shechia, this is from a pasuk from Yeshaya, means to bend over downwards, as in veshach, and he will bend it down, the arrogance of man. And in the phrase, just as the shoiche, what's soiche? The swimmer spreads out his hands to swim, a swimmer is bent over on his stomach in order to swim. So we see from this word lasuach, to talk, to converse, regarding Yitzchak can also mean to speak and or to bend down. And when you bend, what are you doing? You're declining your posture to enter from a space of a straight posture to a bent posture. Where is he siaching? Where is he conversing? I.e., where is he lowering? And by the way, what does it mean when you converse, right? You're bending your talk, you're bending your speech, you're bending your power of communication from its erect posture in the mind, intellectually, that everything was clear, and now you have to go into another person's mind. That's what it means to converse. That's what it means to talk to somebody. When I speak to you, right, can I talk to you? Which means to say, can I express myself? Can I lower my ideas from me to you? So when it says, Vayeitzei Yitzchok lasuach, he has to now bend, he has to now prostrate the power of wherever Yitzchok is coming from into the sadeh, basadeh. It's not in the field geographically, it's basadeh. He's injecting the power of sadeh with whatever he has, hubar. When does he do this? Velifnois erev. Yitzchak establishes mincha. When is mincha ideally meant to be davened? According to the Arizal, right before evening, as the sun is setting, not before. And this is indicative of the power of melding together darkness and light, melding together the clarity, the perceptivity of the daytime, and allowing that to shoiche, right? We said lasuach, to shoiche, to bend into, to now incline into the darkness of the night. The word lifnois literally means lifnei, right? When did he do this? Lifnois erev, before evening, means that Yitzchak bent down to a level outside of holiness in order to what? Lifnois doesn't only mean before evening, but lefanois ha'erev ha'choshech, to clear out, right? Like the word in Hebrew, panui, right? Are you panui? Are you available, right? Can you clear out your schedule? Are you occupied or are you free, right? It means to cause a vacancy. So lefanes ha'erev v'achoshech, to clear out, to cause a vacancy of the spiritual night and darkness. So how do we translate the pasuk? Vayeitzei Yitzchok, and Yitzchok emerged from a spiritual realm and he had to lasuach, to bend himself down, to now prostrate into the level of basada in the field, which is a place outside of the city where regular people live, referring to an area of perhaps unholy places. Lifnes edeb, in order to clear out and remove the spiritual darkness from that place. And this is the relevancy of the whole entire discussion, the introduction of it, the differentiating between Mishnah and Brisa. And really, this is indicative of what Torah has to do also, that Torah has to come from such a high place. It has to also Vayeitzei. Torah has to emerge from such a pristine, sublime, holy place. As we discussed before, it had to enter into a place, into a space, a reality of darkness, dealing with falsehood and dealing with lies. Like David HaMelech says, you have placed me amidst darkness. Zeh Talmud Bavli, it's the Gemara or the Medrash says that this is when David HaMelech says, you have placed me in darkness. This is a reference to Talmud Bavli, the Babylonian Talmud. Bavli from the word bilbul, to confuse. That this is a confusing Talmud. There's so many details, it's too overwhelming for me. That you place me in darkness, that is, so to speak, trespassed into a world, a falsified world, a false world, afilu b'sheker, even into lies. But why? There's a purpose here. In order to cause a vacancy, a removal of the nighttime of the spiritual darkness. Vayhi Ohr, and to cause, right, Torah, for the word Torah Ohr, to cause a light, to cause a glistening of Hashem's divine presence. Or that at the time of evening there will be light. For example, anybody wants to remove an undesirable thing from a place. In order to remove that undesirable thing from that place, you have to go into that place. In psychological terms, right? The gift and power of therapy, it's a very dangerous location you have to go into psychologically, but that's the only way to undo and to really heal from those traumatic experiences. You have to go into there in order to remove it. But not that you should remain there. Don't remain tethered in the trauma. Rather, look into the past, look into the darkness of self, and say, no, that's not a definition of me. So too, we can apply this analogy to Torah. The Torah, in its pristine state, has, so to speak, been traumatized by the physicality of the world and by the lies of this world. And it's the job of the Jew, who's intrinsically connected, related intimately to the realm of Torah and to God, and it has now become enlarged and connected to claims of falsehood. This is all in order to remove that darkness, all in order to create a vacancy, to allow the light to then pervade, to then transform darkness into light. And therefore, anybody who occupies themselves in the business of Torah, meaning to say that they become consumed by the power of this light, they are now have the capability and power and tools to remove and push away this darkness. I'm sorry. That this is the power of transformation, to sublimate, using the tool of Torah to push away the darkness and the questions, the confusions of Torah itself, that conceals over the intellectuality behind the truthful judgment or law, and to search, discover, and find the truth. The revelation of Hashem's divine will. This is all part of the game. That we have to go into our own psychological darkness and play custodian. Remove it with the brooms, the spiritual brooms. As it says regarding the pasuk, and the intellectual ones will brighten. They will cause a radiance. That the maskil, meaning to say, when you enter into the haskala of Torah, yazhiru will become zayar. It could also be meticulous. But it also means to illuminate. We're going there. Ayin Shal. Look in the explanation of that pasuk there. So, Vayeitzei, this is the meaning of Yitzchok emerged. He exited in order to go into the field, lasuach, to talk, to converse, but we also said it means to draw down, to bend down. In order to clear out the negative space, the negative energy of darkness, and to remedy and heal it. Dafka Yitzchok has the power to do this. Yitzchok also does it through, in a sense, comedy, laughter. But the irony is, Shemupichin is pachad. He personifies the power of pachad, reverence, trepidation, v'yiras Hashem, fear of Hashem. If there's no honor, if there's no respect, if there's no trepidation, there cannot be wisdom. You cannot learn unless there's some semblance of respect, some semblance of awe of either your beloved, a spouse, a friend, but here in particular, a teacher, that you cannot absorb the new experience of wisdom if there's no sensation of awe, of trepidation, of tremendous respect and honor. And therefore it says, a person who says, I only have Torah, afilu Torah eloi, even Torah he doesn't have. Why? Because it became an egocentric game. He remains in darkness. In truth, it says that Hashem uses darkness as his concealment. He cloaks himself in darkness. That even though, notwithstanding that he's in the realm of darkness, nevertheless, this is his cloak, this is his garment. This is the meaning of it. He clears out, he paves the path, pushes away the darkness and the spiritual evening. That in the time of evening there will be light. And where is this manifest? Libun hilchasa, the clarification, the whitening of halacha. That means to say that there's a certain darkness, a certain confusion in Talmudic verbiage and dissertation. And once we get to the clarification of halacha, this is like the whitening, a glistening, a sparkling of the halacha, its final conclusion. And this is also the meaning of making a bracha on the Torah. Let's see what the explanation has to say on that. This is also the meaning of making a bracha on the Torah before learning. It says in the verse in Yirmiyah, Hashem says, why was the land of Israel lost? Because they, the Jewish people, abandoned my Torah. Our sages comment in Nidarim 81b, what is the meaning of the verse that the land was lost because they abandoned the Torah? We find that they learned Torah diligently and did not abandon it. The answer is that they did not make a bracha on the Torah before they learned. Chassidus explains that making a bracha on the Torah doesn't just mean saying the words of the bracha printed in the siddur. It really means that prior to learning Torah, one must come to appreciate the holiness of the Torah, not just the intellectual stimulation that it impacts on you, and how it connects us to Hashem. This comes from the morning prayers prior to Torah study, when a Jew awakens a love and fear for Hashem, and recognizes that the yearning to connect to Hashem that he awakens during his prayer can only be fulfilled by learning Torah. The phrase Baruch Hu b'Torah, they made a blessing on the Torah, can also be translated as Baruch Hu b'Torah, they drew down into the Torah. Baruch Hu from the word bracha, right? Baruch can also mean to bless, but also means to draw down, to bend down. This means that through the prayer before Torah study, we draw down Hashem's light into the Torah that we learn, revealing how Hashem is really hiding himself in the Torah, and we connect to him specifically there. This completes the idea mentioned in the Maimer that when a Jew fears Hashem's, the aspect of Yitzchok, then he bends down into the field, meaning he reveals how Hashem is hiding in the darkness of the Gemara and the Brisa, which causes that the night should be cleared out and replaced with light. Yesher koach. Look in those Marim. Yeah. The question was asked, the association between Yitzchok and Yitzchok personifying the attribute of fear with what did you say? Was Torah study?
Fear with action.
With action. And I'm replying that it's specifically the individual that fears Hashem, that where is he located more? He's much more located in the action-orientedness of the mitzvahs than in the intellectuality of Torah. Because a person can delude themselves and fool themselves by saying, oh, Torah, of course I'm connected to Hashem, but there's also an intellectual attraction to the ideas of how deep and profound Torah is. Whereas Dafka Yitzchak is the power of Yira, that I'm not swayed by the intellectuality of Torah. Rather what? I'm Baruch Hu b'Torah tchila. I'm making a bracha in the Torah. It's not about the Torah, it's about the bracha. It's not about the intellectuality, it's about the mitzvah dafka. And it's specifically the mitzvah, the person who just relegates godliness to the intellectual achievement of Torah cannot strip himself away of the tainug, of the oineg, of the seichel. There has to be an appreciation of the yira that is specifically located in the action-oriented mitzvahs.
But Yitzchok was the one who stayed. Yitzchok was the one. Yaakov went, did more, presumably. We see. Meaning, if Yitzchok was Bina, isn't that more the intellectual?
We didn't speak about Yitzchok being associated with Bina. In general,
We didn't.
in general, Yitzchok is Gvura. And therefore he's associating Yitzchok with Pachad.
But is Yitzchok not Bina? On the same side? How are they?
It is, but that's a different, totally different subject. In this will relate Yitzchak. Avram is Chesed LaAvram, and Pachad Yitzchak is the idea. Pachad is the internal emotion of the external characteristic of Gvura. What Gvura is to the outside, Pachad is to the inside. Because I have Pachad Hashem, right? Because I have reverence and fear. Let's think about it in a disciplinary way, right? Gvura will translate as discipline, right? Self-control, discipline. Say severity, but discipline, self-control. Because I'm internally fearful, I have trepidation, let's say in a healthy way, of my teacher, therefore I'll have control, I'll have more self-control, I'll be more disciplined. Okay? So that's the external of the internal. So Yitzchak is Gvura, but internally he's Pachad. He's saying that where is the Pachad more manifest? In the intellectual achievement of Torah study, or in the practical concretization of mitzvah's performance? It's dafka in the mitzvah. And maybe you'll say even deeper that it's dafka, the davening is the mitzvah. Lasuach basada, he's saying Vayeitzei Yitzchok lasuach basada, that which mitzvah is he most attracted to fulfill the power of trepidation, fear, reverence in his soul? It's dafka in the meditation of prayer.
It's the one where I'm specifically letting go of my perspective.
Correct. Davening is about me connecting to Hashem, not about Hashem connecting to me. And therefore, I become totally obliterated from myself. Where is that experience? Dafka not in Torah. Dafka in Tefillah. That's why you have to daven before you learn. Perhaps we could say that
We learn after we daven.
What?
Why? During the week, because you're supposed to the halacha after you daven.
Correct. This is exactly the mimer. Because you have to ein yira ein chachma. But we have to have the chachma. We have to draw down the power that was just generated in the tefillah in the Torah. Or else what do we have? We only have the emotions and it will combust. The Torah at the end of the day is the groundedness. But you can't have the Torah on its own without the reverence. Then it just becomes chachma without yira. And that will also wither.